Hi everyone. So for this week, we are watching and talking about Memento. This is a really interesting film that has a lot to say about how the mind works and how memory works and how time works. So in my video, I'm going to talk about a couple of main things, and then feel free to talk about these things or about anything else that you noticed either in the quiz or the discussion boards for this week. So the first thing I want to talk about in terms of Memento is just how this movie represents Leonard's mind. Now, as you went through this film, you might have found yourself being confused. It is an extremely disorienting film, and one of the reasons it's so disorienting is that it is trying really, really hard using certain techniques and methods to let us inside the mind of someone who cannot develop new memories. So the storyline is incredibly fragmented. It's all over the place. It moves back and forth. There is a ton of repetition in this movie. You will find as you look through the film, or if you decide to rewatch it, that there are a lot of tiny details that pop up again and again and again. And that is because of how fragmented the movie is and how it moves back and forth between these different understandings of time and different representations of time. Now, the second thing I want to talk about with Memento is that this movie, in some ways, has a really general point about how memory works and how memory is connected to identity. Now, of course, our main protagonist, Leonard, is unique, is not a typical condition that we encounter in the world. However, regardless, this movie still has something to say about how everyone, you, me, the person next to us, relies on memory in order to come up with an understanding of our own identity and our own personality. Now, a really, really long time ago, John Locke, who is a philosopher who lived in the 18th century, had this idea. And the idea was pretty simple. It was that memory is the foundation of identity. So if I were to go and look through a photo album and see a version of myself when I was 7, the only reason I know that is myself, in addition to my parents telling me that that was a 7-year version of me, is that I'm able to piece my identity together using my memory. So I'm able to search back and say, I remember what my brothers looked like when I was 7, and they looked like that. I remember the experiences. I remember something about my life when I was 7. Now, this movie is thinking about what happens to identity when that kind of grounding, that idea that I know that that 7 version of me is still me because of memory, what happens when that goes away? What happens when an individual is constantly in a state of rediscovery? There are several moments in the film when we see Leonard trying to piece his identity together using memory and just cannot do it because of his condition. I will give you one example, and there are a lot of others that you can bring up in the discussion board or in the quiz. One example happens about 23 minutes into the film. Now here, the movie chops off the timeline and gives us an image of Leonard in his bed. He wakes up and he asks himself, where am I? He needs to piece everything around him together. And we actually have a front row seat to how his mind works on a regular basis. That's what he's always doing. He's always rediscovering. And his mind and his identity resets itself every 15 minutes or so. Sometimes quicker than that. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, and it's going to be more a topic for discussion and for further thought than something I'm going to work through in detail, just because it's really, really complicated and it takes a lot of time to work through. Well, and the topic is time. All right? In the discussion boards and in the quizzes, you will have a chance to kind of piece things together. This movie has a really interesting and complex representation of time. At certain points, It backtracks. It films things in reverse, especially in that first scene. It is not linear. Now, when I say linear time, all I mean is that you move from the beginning of a story through the middle, and then you reach the end. The movie doesn't do that. It goes back and forth between two different timelines. The first is in black and white, and the second is in color. Now, in the quiz and the discussion boards, I'll really invite you to try to piece those two together and how the movie moves back and forth between them. All right, that's it for me. I really look forward to seeing what everyone thinks in the discussion boards and the quizzes.